you see as the goals of this war that we're in, because at various times it's been described as goals to raise revenue, to stop fentanyl trafficking, close trade deficits. So is the goal here to raise revenue for the federal treasury?
Hey there, fellow patriots. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Andrew, and today we're diving into an issue that is seriously affecting the American people. And you know what? This one hits close to home for so many of us. I'm talking about the Trump administration's blanket tariffs and the latest grilling from Senator Tina Smith, who's not holding back in her confrontation with the U.S. Trade Representative about these tariffs and their consequences. Now look, I'm a proud left-wing patriot, and I believe in fighting for fair trade in American workers, but I gotta tell you, these tariffs, they don't feel like a fair fight for us. Now let's watch the video.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Senator Crapo, and welcome, Ambassador Greer. So it seems to me that President Trump has started a big trade war, and the war is with everyone on multiple fronts, with allies as well as adversaries. I think this is a little bit of what Senator Tillis was getting at. It feels really indiscriminate and chaotic, and apparently we're still just in the early days of this. And I just need to tell you that Minnesotans are freaked out. Farmers who are experiencing, you and I have talked about this, one of the worst farm economies in the last 25 years are looking at lower prices and higher input costs. Minnesotans who work on the Iron Range, which is the source of 80% of the iron ore that goes into American-made steel, they want fair trade. They want us to stand up to illegal steel dumping, but like 500 of them have been laid off because the demand for American cars has been slumping. I mean, I could go on in every sector. Consumers are freaked out. This looks like a giant sales tax to them. Retirement stock market plummeting, and it's very hard for people to understand what is going on here. So what I want to do is to get an understanding from you of what you see as the goals of this war that we're in, because at various times it's been described as goals to raise revenue, to stop fentanyl trafficking, close trade deficits. So is the goal here to raise revenue for the federal treasury?
Senator, this is not a trade war. We have, most countries have said they're not going to retaliate. We have an underlying emergency. The goal of this, of the trade deficit, where President Biden left us with a $1.2 trillion trade deficit, and the goal is to address that and the offshoring that led to that and the non-reciprocal treatment that led to that. That's the goal. Certainly there's a tariff revenue effect. If the countries do not do this, then they will be subject to the tariff, and we'll have a tariff on foreign goods instead of American-made goods.
So, okay, so if the goal is to close trade deficits, then that would mean that the tariffs are a negotiating tool here. Is that right? Is that how you see it?
So the
or
tariff.
Are you trying to use them to?
Well, it can go both ways, Senator. So on the first, we've talked a lot about negotiations because a lot of these countries, they have closed off markets to our exports in unfair ways. They've done it for decades, and nothing has persuaded them. Sitting down, talking nicely hasn't persuaded them.
But if you were trying to, so I'm all for fair trade, and I'm all for the idea that if somebody is not trading fairly with us, if they're not giving us fair markets, then we need to have a strategy to go after that. But yet this is a blanket approach. It's an across the board approach, which is going to contribute to raising costs, and that's why it just feels, I think, so chaotic to people.
Well, the trade deficit is a global issue. So you can't if you're trying to get the trade deficit, you can't just pick one or two countries and say, we're going to do this and become Swiss cheese. Like that would not be coherent. What's coherent has a global approach to what's a global issue, to take these countries, country by country, figure out how we can address our trade deficit with them and address trade market barriers with them. And that's the right approach. And that's what's happening. That's what the president's directed.
But I mean, as Senator Warner was pointing out, I guess it's a floor, you could call it, a 10% tariff, even with countries where we have a trade surplus. And by the way, this formula that the administration used to assign this so-called reciprocal tariff it just seems so arbitrary. I mean, where did that formula come from?
It's straightforward and it's common sense. It came from White House economists, and they proposed that looking at a country's trade deficit is a good approximation of the net effect of the unfairness, of the higher tariff rates, the higher trade barriers, the unfair trade practices, the dumping, the subsidies, all of that. And that's how you can capture that.
Well, so would you adapt that because it's based on 1 year, and of course, trade surpluses, deficits can vary quite a bit from year to year. Would your plan be to change it if you get new yearly data? And then that would suggest, I guess, that the tariffs would be in place for a long time.
Well, we need to assess. Again, I think it becomes country by country. We have the baseline 10% to make sure there's no arbitraging of different jurisdictions. And I mean, all these countries that are subject to the highest rates, most of them have already come to talk to us about how to get it down. I mean, we have to take this step by step. We have to take it country by country to address these issues. The status quo just won't work anymore, and we can't do it piecemeal.
I'm not arguing for the status quo, Ambassador. I'm not arguing for the status quo, but I am questioning the rationality of this policy that is it's so chaotic and it seems so arbitrary. Again, it seems so internally inconsistent because, for example, if your goal is to onshore manufacturing, something that I think many of us on this side of the dais believe strongly that we need to be making things in this country again, but then that would suggest that these tariffs need to be in place for a very long time because what capital wants is consistency and stability and predictability. Yet at the same time, the administration seems to be arguing that we would be, waiving some of these tariffs if we could somehow magically negotiate, 50 new trade agreements with 50 different countries. I know my time is up here. I wanted to ask you a question about trade adjustment assistance, which I will follow up as a question for the record. Again, I think that my constituents are freaking out here, and I understand why. Thank you.
Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding this hearing. Now, Mr. Greer, it's been less than a week since President Trump started this.
So first off, hats off to Senator Tina Smith for standing up for us, the American people. She rightly calls out the Trump administration's tariffs as chaotic and indiscriminate. And let me tell you, folks, as a patriot, I can't help but agree with her. These tariffs aren't just aimed at countries we disagree with. They're harming our own allies and putting unnecessary pressure on our farmers, our manufacturers, and working class people across this country. We're talking about farmers who are already struggling, many of them in Minnesota, the state that Senator Smith represents, dealing with lower prices for their goods and higher input costs because of this policy. And the iron workers she mentions? Those are real people who are losing their jobs. And the worst part is that this trade war is making it harder for them to survive. If we're going to make America great again, let's start by making sure we don't destroy the lives of working people in the process. Senator Smith calls these tariffs a giant sales tax. And you know what? She's right. This isn't just an abstract issue for the elites in Washington. It's hitting everyday consumers, the people who are struggling to make ends meet. Look, I'm all for standing up to unfair trade practices. But the way this policy is being applied, across the board indiscriminately, is only driving up costs for working families and consumers. The stock market instability she points to, that's real. So many people's retirement accounts are getting hammered by this chaotic approach, and it feels like no one's paying attention to the people who are actually getting hurt. Now, the big question Smith asks, and it's something that really bugs me too, is, what's the goal here? For months, the administration has been spinning this as a way to close trade deficits, tackle fentanyl trafficking, and even generate revenue. But it's hard to follow the logic, especially when the justifications seem to change every time we turn around. But as the trade representative points out, he claims this is about addressing a trade deficit left by the Biden administration. And look, I'm not here to defend Biden. There are definitely things we need to fix on that front. But let's get one thing straight. A $1.2 trillion trade deficit didn't happen overnight. And the solution isn't just throwing tariffs on every country and hoping it works. We need a strategy, not a scattershot approach. Here's the thing though, folks. Tariffs are a tool, yes, but when you use them recklessly, they hurt your own people more than anyone else. What Senator Smith is pointing out here is that this blanket approach is not only ineffective, it's hurting our workers and driving up prices for consumers. How does that make sense for someone who claims to care about the American worker? If we really want to help manufacturing in this country, we need to make sure that the policy is predictable, consistent, and based on real, strategic goals, not just quick political wins. As a left-wing patriot, I believe in making things here in America. I want to see good jobs for our people, fair trade practices, and a strong manufacturing base. But we can't have a chaotic, inconsistent tariff policy that creates more harm than good. The stability that businesses need to thrive, that's not something we're seeing right now. And here's another point that really stood out to me. The trade representative keeps defending this formula that assigns tariffs based on a country's trade deficit with the U.S. But where did this formula come from? Is it based on years of data, economic modeling, or is it just some arbitrary number pulled out of thin air to make the president look tough? Because right now, it feels like it's the latter. Senator Smith calls it arbitrary, and she's absolutely right. If we're going to rely on trade deficits as the measure for tariffs, we have to take into account the fluctuations that happen year to year. It's like making a decision based on one bad day of the stock market and acting like it's the end of the world. That's not how you run a country's economic policy. And sure, they say they're ready to negotiate with countries to lower the tariffs once trade deals are struck. But you know what? If capitalists are looking for stability and predictability, they're not going to get it with this kind of unpredictable, all-over-the-place approach. It's honestly kind of a mess. Cut to an image of a group of business people having a meeting. Folks, as a patriot, I want to see this country strong, but I also want to see policies that make sense for the people who put in the hard work to build it. We need fair trade. We need policies that support American workers and businesses, and we need to make sure that the tariffs we impose actually serve a clear, logical goal. At the end of the day, it's about making sure that we don't sell out the American people for short-term political gains. The American worker deserves more than this chaotic, arbitrary mess of a tariff policy. They deserve a strategy that puts their jobs, their families, and their futures first. Thank you so much for watching this reaction video. As always, if you agree with what I'm saying, hit that like button and let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about these tariffs and how they're being implemented? Is it fair to the American people, or is this policy more about short-term political wins? Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, I'll be here fighting for fair trade, good jobs, and a strong America the right way. Stay patriotic.